Hello everybody, this is Tetrafolium, and this is my first video covering the Turn 17 Rocks Draft League. This is a draft league that I'm holding between myself and my friends. We constructed this pool of Pokemon, and we have a few rules that we've added to the regular OU gameplay, and that's the format that we'll be playing in. To briefly explain those rules, we will be imposing an item clause, so only one item per Pokemon per game. So let's say, for example, that you drafted Volcarona, and you also drafted, say, Talonflame. Only one of those Pokemon is allowed to have the heavy-duty boots, so that's something that will be important if you've got a lot of Rock-weak Pokemon. Another thing that we've done is we have reintroduced some Ubers into the draft. Notably, we have Annihilate. We have, if I can find it, Espathra. And we have Houndstone, which is somewhere over here in RU. We have, though there's an asterisk with them. Annihilate is not allowed to use Rage Fist. Espathra is not allowed to run Speed Boost, and Houndstone is not allowed to use Blaster Specs. We just put these back in because they're Pokemon that are fun to use, and we don't think that they were broken with these changes. We could have maybe tried to get another Pokemon in or two, but not easily. So those were just the three that we went with. If I can explain the tiers here, we split up the entirety of the Paldean Pokedex into a couple different sections. So you have a OU Plus consisting of the 10 best Pokemon in OU by our estimation. We also used usage statistics from Pikalytics, as well as Smogon's viability rankings for each tier to help us decide how to split these up. Why did we pick 10 of these? Well, we have 10 people in the draft, so we figure that these are the 10 best Pokemon. Everybody gets one of the best Pokemon, quote unquote. Of course, just because a Pokemon is, say, good, like let's say Baxcalibur, we think is probably better than Azumarill, but it all depends on how you use it and how you build your team around it. So, you know, these are just how draft leagues go. You are allowed to pick one OU plus, one OU, one UU plus, one UU, up to three RU, and 3 NU and lower. We also had Little Cup Pokemon here. You were allowed to pick them in this slot, but I just didn't put them because there's too many of them, and nobody ended up picking a Little Cup Pokemon, to nobody's surprise. Yeah, so with these four, only getting one from each of these tiers, the relative power level of this draft league is going to be very low. We in fact played a draft league for Generation 8 with 8 players. For reference, I went 7-0 in the regular season. It was a round robin. And then I went 6-2 in the playoffs and won the championship. The playoffs were played in a best of 3. That's probably what we're going to do this time, except now we have 10 players. Maybe have a little play-in tournament as well. Who knows? We did a second draft league in VGC, but that died about halfway through because of waning interest and people getting busy and things like that. So I hope that doesn't happen this time, since we're all doing it over the summer. But yeah, let's get on to the draft. So here are some of the teams that we're looking at. The Shadow Wizard Money Gang, the Identity Thieves of Hearts, the Vaulton Veluzas, Goldengo's Pokemon team, the Grafted Grafai Eyes, Agency Pyramids, which is me, Vulcan Bloons, Null Pointer Exception, Anor Landu Azus, and the Macon Steppas. So this is in the order left to right of who got to draft. Unfortunately, I don't have the order of when the Pokemon were drafted, but I do remember the first round pretty well, so I'll go through this step by step. In any such case, I should go through what I was planning before this. So when I knew we were doing a draft league, and once we set which Pokemon were allowed and what tiers they were in, I was thinking I kind of wanted to run with Iron Valiant, and I wanted to run with Sandy Shocks. What I was going to do with them is make basically set up with like a Specs or a Booster Energy Iron Valiant using primarily Focus Blast and Moonblast, and then have Sandy Shocks set Gravity, which increases the accuracy of moves. So I would have the strongest Focus Blast in the game with an option to Terra Fighting to make it even stronger. However, I ended up getting 6th in the draft order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. And I'll be honest, in this draft, the way that this was all set up, I kind of think being in the middle here is the hardest place to be. Like, I think Grafted Grafai Eyes captain and myself had the worst draft spots because we're too late to get these Pokemon, which I would say these are probably the 4 best Pokemon to draft, and we're too early to build a core like this, an offensive core like this. This is a very scary offensive core, let me tell you, with Dragapult and the Azumarill. But nevertheless, I thought, okay, well, if I don't get Iron Valiant, then maybe I'll get Goldengo, because maybe somebody will be like, oh, I don't want to use Goldengo, it's not strong enough, maybe I'll take Dragonite or Roaring Moon instead, because those are really strong, really heavy hitters. But no, Goldengo's Pokemon team, of course, took Goldengo. We decided the team names after the fact, because I think it's a little weird when you've decided your team name and that Pokemon is not on your team, and in fact is on somebody else's team. But like, no shade thrown at anybody in particular. Just a personal opinion. So, in any case, the first round, Shadow Wizard Money Gang takes the Great Tusk. I think that this is a good overall first pick. Great Tusk consolidates a lot of roles that you need on a team. A hazard setter, a hazard remover, a bulky ground type. 3 things that are extremely necessary. And there's obviously a reason why Great Tusk is the most commonly used Pokemon in OU right now. Except, no, I think it still is. King Gambit was rising a lot in the last 2 months, but I still think that Great Tusk is like over 50% usage, which is insane. Is it the best Pokemon in the draft? I don't think so. Personally, I think King Gambit is the strongest Pokemon in the draft, but Great Tusk is definitely a good pick. And if you're going first, it's just really nice because you can make a lot of Pokemon work with Great Tusk. Next, we have the Identity Thieves of Hearts, sniping my Iron Valiant pick. So that kind of nixed my whole strategy, the whole team that I was thinking about building around Iron Valiant. So I said, okay, that's fine. I've got a team idea for Goldengo. Next person takes King Gambit, which much to the dismay of literally everybody else. who had to draft after Vaulting Veloozas. Um, and then fourth pick was Goldengo. So yeah, that nixed my other idea. So now I'm kind of just drafting free ball. I had no plan for what I wanted after that. Um, uh, Fifth in the draft order, the drafted Grafai's drafted Grafai first. Um, the captain for this team really just wanted to use Grafai, and he figured that he's one of the better Pokemon players in this league. I don't know if I would argue he's better than me, but he is one of the better ones. And that he could build a team based around what was left. And I don't think that that's a bad strategy, especially when you're going after all like the really, really good Pokemon have been picked. Not to say that Dragonite, Baxcalibur, Roaring Moon, Volcarona, etc. are bad picks, but like it's so easy to build a team around those first four. And they're so strong that you would want to pick them if you had the opportunity. So going Grafaiai here is, I mean, it's probably not the best strategy, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I kind of follow suit here, and the first Pokemon I picked actually was not Volcarona, it was Garganackle, or Garganachi, if you're familiar with Pokemon MD and his way of referring to Garganachi, and that's probably how I'm gonna keep referring to it because I think it's so funny. Why did I pick Garganachi? Well, I was looking at what was picked already, these four and Grafaiai, and I was thinking, well, I probably want to start by building a defensive core, and I figured that the next four Pokemon that were picked were Dragonite, Dax, Dragapult, and Roaring Moon. I figured I might as well go ahead and get a head start building my defensive core. After I picked Garganachi, I knew exactly that I wanted Screamtail, especially if Dragapult was going to get picked up, because Screamtail works really well with Garganachi's covering Garganachi's fighting weakness, and just has really good bulk overall. And Garganachi with Purifying Salt covers for Screamtail's ghost weakness. Albeit they do share a steel type weakness. And when I play against Goldengo's Pokemon team, I will think really hard about what I'm gonna do. But these two, I think, form a really good defensive core. So I thought it would be fine to go ahead and pick like that first. So yeah, these four were chosen next, and then it's a snake draft. So the Macon Steppas, after picking Roaring Moon, picked Ceruledge. I don't know if I necessarily agree that that was a great draft strategy, picking Roaring Moon and Ceruledge. I don't know if they complement each other that well. But you know, it's not my draft, so I'm not gonna say. And if he watches this video and he thinks I'm calling him out, I totally am. So step up. We have Azu, Corviknight, Tinglu, and then of course I go Screamtail. I already mentioned this core right here being a strong offensive core. In fact, this person in the first draft league had both Dragapult and Azumarill on their team, so I already have an idea of what they're going to do. And since I played it against it in the finals of that league, actually, I hope I've got some element of practice against it that I'll know what to do. Grafted Grafaiai is just their first actual pick, other than Grafaiai, of course, because Grafaiai is a pretty good pick for RU, to be honest. They picked Iron Treads. pretty good pick. In fact, Iron Treads was a really high value pick. I think it's one of the better steel types. It removes hazards. Ground type is good. Um, Clearly not as good as Great Tusk, but for an OU pick, I'd say that's pretty decent. The only other steel type in OU that I can think of off the top of my head is Orthworm, and Shed Tail is not allowed anymore. So it's got it's not a bad pick by any means, but it's not quite as good as it could have been. And I was not really interested in that. Of course, I have Garganacci for my OU pick. Now, one thing I may have neglected to mention up until now is that if you wanted, you could pick a Pokemon from a lower tier in your higher tier spot, and that is what the Grafted Grafai's did. He didn't want Volcarona or Iron Moth, which happened to be the last two OU plus. So he opted to go for Walking Wake in his OU plus spot. Totally valid. I think that's fine. And then next, for pretty much the rest of the draft, everybody kind of just picks their OU, then their UU plus, and then their UU, and straight down. I'll go through, just for the sake of not making this video 3 hours long, I'll just go down my draft order, and if you're curious, I'll keep this up so that you can see all the other drafts. So I picked Serena here because I noticed, well, Garganacci is weak to ground type, and I need a spinner, so I kind of just went with Serena. I think Serena is a pretty good pick for a defensive grass type. Now, some people might not think of Serena as a defensive Pokemon because, well, its defenses are okay, but not that spectacular, and plus grass types kind of suck defensively. But you have to keep in mind that in a draft league, the average power of a Pokemon is going to be a lot less. So when Serena is up against a Pokemon like, for example, Crocodile, which it resists one of the stabs of, or Cloth, its defense will actually serve it pretty well. It's got U-turn. I really like that about Serena. And then its ability, Queenly Majesty, might save me in certain scenarios. Like Dragonite was one of the first picks, and being completely immune to extreme speed is going to be really nice. Could help with Azumarill as well. It's almost a hard counter to Azumarill unless they opt to go for Sap Sipper, which if they do that, kudos to them, but I doubt that they will. Prove me wrong. So yeah, I like the Serena pick. The next one I went for was Oricorio Pom Pom. I picked the first RU Pokemon in the draft other than Grafaiai. So I went with RU's best Pokemon, Oricorio. Or at least the best Pokemon at the time of this recording. I like the electric type. I like that it gets U-turn. It doesn't get Volt Switch, unfortunately. I think it should, but I mean, who am I to say? So another U-turner is good. It gets Defog, so if I have a matchup where Serena is really bad, like for example against Null Pointer Exception, who has 1, 2, 3, 4 poison types, a fire type, a bug type, and an ice type, and a flying type, 2 flying types, in fact. Yeah, actually every Pokemon on this team completely claps a grass type. So, unfortunately, I'm probably not going to bring Serena to that matchup. Oricorio does get Defog, so that gives me an option for a Defogger. It's unfortunate that Oricorio is weak to rocks, and it's my defogger, which means that I'm probably going to have to give that the heavy-duty boots, which means that Volcarona is not going to have the heavy-duty boots, which, yeah, that's really, really tough, but that just is what it is. I wish that Skunk Tank got defog again, but I don't know. Maybe when Pokemon Home comes out and completely shakes up this whole draft league, uh, because of move availability, I'll get my Skunk Tank with defog like I really want, but it is what it is. Yeah, Oricorio, as you can see in the bottom right here with this GIF, does also get Quiver Dance this generation, so that's going to be really nice. I've got 2 Quiver Dance sweepers, potentially. Yeah, I'm very sorry to everybody who has to face me and hates Quiver Dance. So the next Pokemon I took was Abomasnow, because at this point I realized, okay, the only 2 OU plus Pokemon that were left available to draft were Volcarona and Iron Moth. So I thought maybe I'll want to set screens, and of course Screamtail does get access to screens. It's a pretty good setter of screens. Abomasnow gets Aurora Veil though, and if I want to free up my Screamtail to do something like Wish Pass, or set up Stealth Rocks, or maybe like a stored powered set, I don't know. I have the option for that now because I can use Abomasnow to set the screens instead. Um, since everybody was kind of going through their first round of RU picks at this point, the second round of RU picks after I picked Abomasnow, so Titan was left on the board, and I figured, well, if I've got Abomasnow, I'll get Titan as well. So Titan being a Slush Rush sweeper is really nice, but it's decent enough without snow that I can do something with it in certain matchups. So like, for example, it still is fairly bulky, still hits pretty hard for an ice type, and still has like Ice Shard. So maybe against like a Dragapult or Dragonite or Roaring Moon, I could bring Titan, and I don't necessarily have to bring Abomasnow to do something against those. You know, if I live a hit and I hit my Ice Spinner or Icicle Crash, whichever one I decide to go for, then I still get a kill. And also with the option to go Abomasnow plus a Titan for the double speed Titan, which would be the fastest Pokemon unscarfed, I think. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is faster than Dragapult, so it's pretty good. Now at this point, I had drafted Oricorio, Abomasnow, and Titan all back to back to back, and I thought, well, that's a lot of Pokemon who are weak to Rock type. Also, Pokemon weak to rocks, so that's not nice. I decided then I needed a fighting type, and I was looking at the NU tier, and I figured, well, I can either go Passimian, who's very offensive oriented, or I could go Tauros Paldean Combat, which is the fighting type Tauros, and have a slightly more defensive option. It's got Intimidate, it's got Raging Bull to break screens. I figured that's probably my better bet. I think it will come in handy versus any team that has notable rock type using Pokemon. Now I don't see too many, but you know, against anybody who tries to set screens, I think Slowbro and Espeon are able to set screens. Now, granted, I don't know if I want to use Tauros Combat versus Espeon specifically, but Grimmsnarl definitely is a screen setter. So yeah, Tauros might come in handy in those cases to just remove the screens. then I was looking through my team again, and I'm like, well, I could use a water type, and I can use a ground type. So I was looking through some of them, and in NU, there's I don't have an option like Vaporeon, which would have been really nice. I don't have an option like Tauros Aqua, which I definitely would have picked that instead if it was down in NU, but unfortunately as a UU Pokemon, and I couldn't afford to give up Serena. So I went with Whiscash. I could have maybe decided to go like Sandaconda as my ground type, and then something like Quillfish as my water type. But Quillfish is not very bulky. Not to say that Whiscash is particularly bulky, but it can serve well as a switch-in. Water Ground is a pretty good type, and even on Whiscash, which I would not argue is a good Pokemon, can serve me pretty well. It would be decent against fire types and electric types, and poison types. So then I was looking at, well, I've got 2 picks left. By this point, the grafted Grafaiis, I want to say it was, okay, so it's down this way and then back and then down and back and down and back, down, back, down. So I get Whiscash here. I get 2 picks before the grafted Grafaiis do. So they're leaving, so he's intentionally leaving me this OU plus slot. I think to myself, well, I get my pick of Volcarona or Iron Moth, and I was kind of drafting this team with the knowledge that I'm going to pick one of the 2 of them. So I figured which one would be better for me. Iron Moth is faster. Iron Moth gives me access to like a booster energy to be like way faster than pretty much the entire metagame. Also with agility to sweep. And I can even manipulate booster energy to give me a special attack boost instead. Or I could go with Volcarona, which is what I ended up doing. I think I like Quiver Dance better than agility. Well, no duh, it's agility plus 2 Calm Mind boosts. I don't like Volcarona's, I don't necessarily love Volcarona's type, but it's not weak to ground, and I kind of identified that I do have a pretty, I have a pretty nasty ground weakness with Garganacci, and I don't want to compound that with my 2 best Pokemon having a ground weakness. So I just ended up going with Volk. It's also a better defensive Pokemon than Iron Moth. So I do have a Fire, Water, Grass core with Volk, Wish, and Serena. It's a kind of scuffed core, but it is one, and Volcarona has pretty decent recovery with Morning Sun and Giga Drain. So I figure I'll go with Volcarona. It's a little safer of a pick. Plus against some of these people who, to be honest, Bulking Bloons, Null Pointer Exception, Goldengo's Pokemon team are extremely new to Pokemon. And I'm not saying that I want to pub stomp them. But I think Volcarona would be a little easier to pub stomp with than Iron Moth. I mean, granted, both of them are super duper strong threats, but Volcarona is going to be a little safer to pub stomp. And with my final pick, I got Skuntank, partially because I incorrectly assumed that it had Defog this generation. It does not. And also because I wanted a grounded poison type, so that the Shadow Wizard Money Gangs, Meowscarada, or Null Pointer Exceptions Quillfish, or um, whichever other Pokemon in this tier gets Toxic Spikes, that I can just counter them by switching the Skunk Tank in. Skunk Tank also has access to Sucker Punch and other types of Dark type Scab, so I'll have options against a lot of the really good Ghost types in this tier, or in this in this format, like Gengar, Dragapult, Ceruledge, um, Hisuian Zoroark. Um, so yeah, that rounds out my field of 10. Of course, I'm only going to be able to bring 6 to each battle, but I think it's a fairly solid pick. It's not quite as solid as my last generation's pick, where I had Clefable, Slowbro, um, Weavile. If I could think about who that for, Steelix was really good for me. And then, of course, a couple other Pokemon, including Serena, in fact. That was a much stronger pick, I think. But I think that draft, just in general, was a lot stronger. There were a lot of stronger Pokemon. I think it's because we allowed for more UU picks. Maybe, like, I think we had, you could basically get 2 OU Pokemon and 3 UU Pokemon. I'm not sure though, don't quote me on that. So yeah, am I afraid of any team? I'm a little afraid of the Anorlando Azus. I don't know how to say that. I didn't play. I think it's a Dark Souls reference. I didn't play Dark Souls, so. This Grimmsnarl with screens is going to be kind of nasty. Espathra is sneaky good. Even though it doesn't get speed boost, Lumina Crash is really scary. Scizor is just a safe pivot. Azu is a potential game-ending sweeper if it gets a belly drum off. I don't really have... Serena's my best bet for it. And, with Ice Spinner now, Azu's dangerous. Dragapult, is always very dangerous. So that's a team that I'm a little scared of. Bulking Bloons, I'm scared of Dragonite, of course, and I'm scared of Ting-Lu, but I can't lie. I think the rest of this team is not very good. So I think it's kind of a 2 Pokemon team. No offense to Bulking Bloons. The team that I'm definitely the most scared of is this one, the Identity Thieves. Valiant and Zoroark are 2 Pokemon that are extremely difficult to deal with defensively. For Valiant, I might be able to wall it with Scream Tail. I think I'm going to have to hard read whether it's physical or special, and kind of just dump all my stats into one of those. Protect will help me out. Hisui Zoroark might confuse me. If I get a play wrong against that Pokemon, then I could be in super duper trouble. Knuckle Stack, of course, is annoying because of Salt Cure. Now, that's rich kind of coming from me. Literally the poster child of Salt Cure. But yeah, it's just something I have to watch out for. I don't think there's anything else on the team that is particularly annoying. Well, Klefki's pretty annoying because it just gets to set spikes and spread Thunder Wave to everything. I really need to watch out with like my Volcarona, but Garganacl has a good matchup against Klefki, so that's something to note. I don't want to say which teams I'm like not at all scared of, because that would just be rude. even though I did just call it the bulking balloons. um, in any case, we stole an idea from the BBR draft league. That would be the draft league that Pokegame, MD, MV, if you know who those people are, that they're doing right now. And that we have Terra captains. So how that worked was after the draft was over, we had 5 minutes to decide our Terra draft or our Terra captains, and we sent them all to one person, just to keep it all anonymous and fair, and then we announced what we had. So you pick one Pokemon on your team who's allowed to terrestrialize. The rest of your Pokemon are not allowed to terrestrialize. And then you're allowed to pick two types that it can terrestrialize into. The first type has to be one of the stabs of your Pokemon, and the second type has to be any other type. So, for example, my Volcarona, I picked fire, for the stronger fiery dances and potentially fire blast if I need it, and water because I think that's a good defensive Terra type for Volcarona. Plus, I could use Terra Blast. I did consider grass, but I kind of figured that I already have two grass types, and my team doesn't have a ton of great answers for fire types once my Volcarona terrestrializes into a grass type. So I just picked water. I figured it would be safer. Um, these other captains, I think that a lot of us had Pokemon that, yeah, that it was pretty obvious that was going to be the Terra captain, like King Gambit, Dark and Fire. I think that's a pretty good pick. Um, Fire is an interesting pick for King Gambit, but it is definitely used in OU a lot. I've also seen Flying to avoid ground types. It helps you in the matchup versus Glamora, especially, but Glamora wasn't picked, so I guess Fire is just as good as any of the niche Terra types that King Gambit could do. Goldango, Steel, Flying, that's super duper standard. You see that all the time. Annihilate, Fighting, Fairy. I'm interested to see how that goes. I kind of prefer Fighting Water, or I would kind of prefer maybe Ghost Water, but albeit if I was using Ghost, I would be using Rage Fist, and Rage Fist is banned, so I have no idea. Probably your strongest move is going to be Close Combat or Drain Punch. So Fighting is probably a good pick, and Fairy is just a good defensive type. And as for Water, I mean he's already got Walking Wake as a switch in for defensive Water type, so I think that's fine. Dragonite is a foregone conclusion. Like you're Terra Normaling every game. There's like it doesn't really matter what you pick outside of that. Baxcalibur, Dragon Ground is a really strong pick. Yeah, that's the reason why it's an OU plus. Dragapult, Ghost and Ground. I think Ghost is a great pick for Dragapult, especially if it gives you an option to go physical. Ground, I'm not sure what is gonna happen with that. Albeit, I don't know if I would Terra Dragapult into anything other than a ground type, or I mean, excuse me, a ghost type. But I guess ground might help. Not sure. We'll see how it goes. And Ceruledge, Fire Fighting, I think that's a pretty decent pick. I kind of like Ceruledge as a bug type. It's a little niche, but Bug happens to resist a lot of types that Ceruledge is would otherwise be scared of. Like you retain a fighting resistance. You get a resistance to ground. You do keep a rock weakness, but I don't think that matters so much once Ceruledge is in. And then like you could go for some like crazy things like Fury Cutter with a metronome to just go absolutely crazy. Although fighting is probably fine. In fact, it might be better. Um, I skipped over Great Tusk. This is like and Zoroark Hisui. Um, these two teams are the ones where it's not super clear who should be the Terra captain. If I were picking, I'd probably pick Slitherwing as the Terra captain, honestly. With you could kind of go either Terra Bug or Terra Fighting, and then Terra Fire. Uh, albeit this team doesn't have any Sunsetters. Torkoal was an OU pick, so Shadow Wizard Money Gang would have to give up their Meowscarada if they want a Sun team. And you know what? They would have a pretty decent Sun team with Great Tusk and Slitherwing. Slowbro is a good defensive water type for a Sun team as well. Um, but yeah, Slitherwing would be really good for that. Great Tusk Steel Fighting. I think Fighting is fine. I think Steel is not that great. I think I'd rather just stay a ground type than Terra Steel. But you know, against certain matchups, maybe Steel would be crazy. Um, not against me. I think I can handle a Steel type pretty well, especially with Salt Cure and a really strong Fire type, um, and a Flying Electric type. Um, maybe Water would have been better as a defensive option. Zoroark here, Ghost Fighting. I think that's fine. There's an argument for Iron Valiant as a, like, maybe fighting Ghost. Or fighting Electric. Depending on who you're scared of more, Goldengo or Corviknight. But I definitely don't think that Zoroark was a bad pick. Yeah, some threats all across the board. But I think I'm a decent player. I think I can handle it, and I hope that I have fun more than anything with the drafts that I have. I'll update on the channel with games that I play. I think my first matchup is against Null Pointer Exception. So I'm going to have to think about how to counter all those poison types. And when I play that game, I'll record that and I'll put it on, and hopefully you'll stick around to see that. So thank you everybody for watching, and pray for good luck.